Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. I'm Albert Fuster. I'm the academic director at Elisava. I'm also the director of the Master on Design and Communication, the Research Master on Design and Communication. And we are pleased to having here today Ezio Manzini, that you surely know. He's a researcher, a writer, and he founded DESIS Network a few years ago, and we were luckily having him here for 3 years, joining Elisava academic staff and students to push a platform called Design for City Making that we are still pushing, some of us. We have had a presentation a few hours ago with the Moody students and the masters from the Ephemeral Architecture and Temporary Spaces, directed by Roger Antoni, that thanks to the municipality, and we have here Lluís Torrents from the Gerència de Drets Socials, we are launching a nice project of this kind we really like, these projects that try to express how design, and specifically design schools, can be active agents in how the cities are and how we live these cities, in terms of identity, in terms of relationality, in terms of mobility, in terms of many, many issues for which, for a while, only or mainly urban planners, architects, economists, social scientists have been dealing with, and that we aim for design to have a clear and main role in this making of the city. So thank you very much for being here, and I will give the floor to Professor Manzini.
Thank you, Albert. Also, I'm pleased to be here again. This is the first time that I come back after this long period of pandemic. Probably we have a very narrow window in which it permits me to come here because I don't know what will happen in the next weeks. But in any case, I'm here and I'm happy to see these friendly faces and in some way to recap something that we did together and also something that we have done during this 1 year and a half in which we have not had these exchanges. I would like only to add one point of my biography, not because my biography is very important, but because give you a kind of a frame in which you can put what I'm going to say. I worked all my life, not all, a large part of my professional life in the design area, but I was, before I was somebody very involved in politics, and afterward I moved more in politics and the environment, and afterward I discovered design as a possibility of intervening in a kind of political way. And probably you will understand in which way I say political now, in the politics of the everyday, not necessarily the politics of the politicians. But this is very important because for me there is a very strong motivation in doing what I've done and what I'm trying to do, to try to push in a certain direction. So I'm not neutral at all. So this is what I wanted to tell you, that what I'm saying, I will say, hopefully, I hope you will recognize that it's based on something that is concrete and real, but you know, reality can be the base for many different stories. So this is the story about the reality as is seen by somebody that have a very precise political position. And just to summarize is to say that we are in a very difficult, I will say catastrophic moment, in which both environmentally, socially, and politically there are a lot of dangers. And therefore, we have to try to see, as a designer, we have to find some positive part on which to leverage. So sometimes I say that I am I must be, and you should be, even though maybe you don't know, professional optimist, because even though things are very complicated and difficult and sometimes appear to us very dramatic, but we have to desperately search for something on which we can work to try to bring the situation in a better direction. So this is a little bit my story, and for some reason that I will explain you, my story at a certain point arrived to this notion of proximity, and as I will try to explain you, for me the proximity put together some physical dimension of functions, of what should happen, of a problem solving, and something that is more related to relational issue and sense making. And so in the proximity, in the double meaning of the term proximity, we have both the side on which as designer we can work, but I think that is not only a story for designers. So let me summarize the background and the story that I want to tell you, and afterward I will go more in detail. I think that we means the Western or Westernized society. So now in a globalized world it's very complicated to say we, because there are so many different positions, different cultural background. Today we talk about a lot about decolonizing whatever and decolonizing design. So we have to declare. So when we say we in this moment, I mean we, as for what I can see, most of you, somebody that has been socialized into the Western society and the modern one with all the idea of modernization. And when we talk about cities, are not necessarily the city in Europe as Florence, where I live, or Barcelona, but the city that has been modernized and the part of the society that has been modernized. And the modernization of the societies and the city can be read by many different angles. It's very rich discussion. And now I will take one angle. And the angle is that those societies and those cities are being the cities and the society of distance. And I will try to explain why. This idea of distance, society of distance, distance in between people and in between people and what they perceive to be their own environment. And there was some ratio in that. And the ratio for me is an idea of efficiency. And the idea that if we want to improve the quality of the life of people, we have to be more efficient. And to be more efficient, what does it mean to be efficient? Is to create specialization. So why should we have so many different shops when we could have one shopping center where everything is inside? And it will be much more effective, and at the end of the day, it will cost less for the unit of goods that you want to buy. Or why we should have the offices spread in the city, where if we put all them together, it will be much more effective and so more efficient. And this can be said practically for every single angle of our life. In the name of efficiency, we put things together. We put activities together. And secondly, given that to be more effective, there is an hypothesis of scale economy. So the biggest is this center where you put all the shops, where you put all the offices, where you put all the healthcare system, where you put all the schools, where you put all the entertainment places, areas. So they become specialized, big, and this means that the reference in terms of where the people living become larger and larger. So specialization and scale generate the distancing of these, the planners say the zoning of the city. So to divide the city in zones and to give some special functions to the different zones. and how the life of people can happen if everything is so far away. The different moments in my life are supposed to be a place where I have to go to work, a place where I have to go to entertain myself, the place where I have to go for shopping. Yes, of course. This is because we imagined that thanks to the car, thanks to the mobility, it's the people that can reconnect the different activity moving around. So you optimize the individual single actions, and you imagine that the people that need to have, we have one life, so we have to move toward different functions in our life, because thanks to the car, thanks to the mobility, and now thanks to the communication, we can reconnect the different parts. So there was a logic, and this logic has both, that if we consider the individual actions, they are very effective. And also, until a certain moment, people could do it. But at the same time, this distancing, we started to recognize that it creates a lot of problems. Environmental problems due to all these people moving around. I will add also fragility, because the system becomes very fragile in this way. And also we will see that if people are continuously moving, if you have this distancing by the point of view of what you can do, for some reason that I will explain better in a while, also there is a distance in the relational dimension of our life. So at the end of the day, people is more alone. So this has been progressively recognized. Some clever critical of the urban and society and the cities started to criticize this idea of the distancing, and in a technical term of zoning 60 years ago. But this was the story of a small group of people. It was not so clear. It was not so clear also to them, all the implication of what was happening. Now we are very clear the implication, environmental and social implication. And I think that this is the motivation why we should rediscuss the idea of proximity. And if you want, what became proximity for me in the proposition that I do is, I don't know if you have the notion of attractors. Attractor means a bunch of ideas that are so strong that many different people that are different motivation, that have a different attitude, that have a different scope in their life, but in some way they move in that direction. So we will say that the change that has to happen is from having an attractor that was toward the city, that was the city of distance. So, and much of our work was about how we will permit the system to work even though the people are not nearby. So how we can have systems that are progressively the larger and more specialized, and so the China become the factory of the world, and afterward we can ship everything around the world. So this idea of creating a system that works even though people, the different producers, the different manufacturers, the different agents, the different users are so far away. And this has been in some way the obsession for a long period, how to make it work. And at the same time, we see what are the results. And now we should have, at least this is my proposal, a new attractor that say how we use the best of our human resources, of our capabilities, of our knowledge, of our technologies also, to recombine the people, to bring people in proximity systems for several different motivations. So this is the story. So if you want, you can go, because I finished. And no, I can finish saying, and design can do a lot. So this is the story. Now I can, I will go, in 40 minutes I want to stop, because I want to have the time to discuss with you, but in some way this is the idea. And I think they can be fast here, because I summarize why it's so important. And of course, this idea that I expressed before is bring to an unsustainable daily commuting. Unfortunately, all those people inside the car have a lot of amenities. Maybe they can also work. So this is a very stupid system because the people are close in the car, they're consuming a lot, but at the same time, they are not very angry because they are in a comfortable environment, listening music and being connected through internet, etc., etc. So all what has been done to improve the quality, and designers did a lot, the quality of the living inside the car made the system more stupid because the system are more clever when they are capable to react. If you create conditions in which people do not react, the system becomes stupid, more stupid than before. And if we see here, we are in America, but we could be in Italy or in Spain, probably in some part. But for the most part of the world, this idea of commuting, this idea of distancing, create this kind of situation in which, of course, maybe the system is less stupid by the point of view that I said before, but is much more dangerous and nasty by many other points of view, and this is the reality. So the goal is to reduce unwanted mobility, and means if I like, nobody will say you have not to move, but we should not be obliged to move. So the idea, the trend, the direction should be I move only if I like to move for some reason, but I'm not obliged for any other reason to move. And this brings what is one side of the meaning of proximity. That means the proximity given by people that are nearby, and being nearby, they can practically exchange some service, and therefore you can build a certain system of services that could be based on the idea of operational proximity. But okay, operational proximity is the condition where home are near to the workplace, schools, shops, etc. I've already said that. And if there was a ratio in the city of distance, it was not only related to the idea of the ideology of efficiency, that kind of efficiency and of scale, but also because for some activity, technology obliged in some way to move toward big scale. Now, as we know and as we can discuss afterwards, there are still very strong drives that bring toward being bigger and vertical organization, but at the same time we know that we have technology that permit also to rethink the system in a much more horizontal way. So we have some technology that could help in moving toward this operational proximity. So the idea of the Fab Lab of the makers has broken the idea that the production is only in big factories, but you can have also manufacturing much more distributed. And all the story about food and the possibility to reorganize food at the local scale with the zero-mile ideas is possible today because there are also some technologies that permit to do it. So I could take all the area of daily life and to see that even though there are still dominant trends toward centralization, there are also technical possibilities, if we want, to have distributed systems. So technically, we can imagine a system that is reshaped to be based on proximity, operational proximity. But at the same time, everybody is talking, and now more than ever, during the COVID, about loneliness, and we know that loneliness is a kind of disease, a kind of pandemic in all the in all the modern part of the society. And loneliness has something to do with distance, and with distance on one side and proximity on the other side, because when we talk about proximity in every language, it has this double meaning. So you can be in proximity with somebody because you are physically near, but also because you have a relational proximity. That means that you are open, that you have a kind of empathy for the others. And it has been shown and proved, and there are a lot of books starting from 50 years ago that talk about our society as the careless society, the society without care. And they are without care for several reasons, but in my view, at the end of the day, it's because the people are also physically distant. So if you, and somebody that lives in your same block, do a totally different life, you move around the city for different motivation in different places, the practical opportunity to intersect the trajectory of your life with the one or the other decrease. And this is so banal, but it's so true. And it also has been proven in quantitative terms. If you don't meet practically the people, if you don't have opportunity to intersect your life with the life of somebody else, there are less possibility than this intersection, this interaction, start to become a conversation, and the conversation start to become a kind of a relationship and maybe a collaboration in doing something together. So there is a very precise link in between the physical dimension of how our bodies are distributed in the space and the possibility to start to have also this relational proximity. Of course, it's not mandatory, so you can meet somebody every day and don't have any will to start a conversation. But if you don't meet anybody, it's really, really very difficult. It's impossible that it happens. Therefore, the proximity is not what generates in a mandatory way relationships and the relational proximity and therefore communities, but create the precondition to make it possible and probable. And this is where we can work as designers. And this is the relational proximity that is a precondition for caring, because this is, I already said, care, I do not explain what is care, but it's this general idea that care is the interaction in which two person or one person in an environment have a special relational empathy. And care asks for touching, to be in touch. You can also organize a care system in the internet, but at a certain point, the core of the care relationships is one person in face to another one, in some way touching each other. And some of us have always discussed about this beautiful book of this Maria della Bella Casa, that says that care is very tactile. So you cannot have care without touching. So in some way, care and proximity are more or less overlapping, 100% overlapping, one with the other one. You cannot have care without proximity. And who started to talk about the city and the society without care, the careless society? There was somebody called McKnight and wrote this book already 50 years ago. It was exactly observing how a certain kind of relationship was substituted by other more formalized relationships that eliminate this interaction based on care and interaction based on this kind of relationship in proximity. And therefore, this is a kind of more formal definition of proximity that is a formal definition for the sake of what we want to do together. And as I said before, we need a scenario of proximity that generates the attractor, so something that can help many different people, and in between them us, designer, to move in a similar direction. So this is a scenario. So let's now say what it is. And if it is a scenario is not only a dream, as you know. A scenario is one of the design tools. And it's not only an image. It's an image that if it is a design scenario, it means that in some way it's possible to implement it. So if you are a designer and you talk about the design scenario, it's not enough to tell the story of some beautiful image that you like, but you are mandatory obliged also to give some hypothesis, some strategy of how and why it could be implemented and in which way. So for me, what makes the scenario of the proximity potentially viable is based on what happened in the last 20 years, and some of us call social innovations. So this is not the core of my, so I am a kind of expert in social innovation, so I gave a lot of lectures that I'm not going to do now, but I need to use this idea and the practices of social innovation for some reason to show that for some reason they can be the basic on which you can build a scenario of proximity. So the social innovations that we talk about is a lot of initiatives that started by a group of people. The one that we observed started at the beginning of this century, and afterward we discovered that social innovation, as every innovation, is not linear but goes by waves. And therefore now, after 20 years, we can talk about a very clear wave of social innovation that started in some part of the modern and modernized society, spread around the world, and have some characteristics. So the characteristic, I'm sure that, I don't know if you call it in this way or not, but nowadays, after 20 years, is sufficiently clear. Maybe 15 years ago, when we started, it took one lecture to explain what is this. But now I think that you can recognize it, even though I don't explain one by one. But we have a group of people that started to behave in a way that was not considered normal in that moment. And what was the abnormal? That where the mainstream was, people are mainly consumers, mainly individual consumers, and they can interact in the market, and they are individual in competition, one with the other one. What is a common denominator of this wave of social innovations has been that some people started to search for solutions that imply to collaborate. And for a long period, for many years, these social innovations has been considered important, and became important also for the institutions because they have been seen as problem solvers. So those people collaborating were capable to organize a way of solving some problems that otherwise will be very difficult to solve or even impossible to solve. And the 90% of the discussion about social innovation has been about how much and in which way these people was presenting ideas that could help in solving problems, and how these ideas could be helped, supported, transformed in something that could last in time, become more solid, etc., spread. And it's not the topic of my lecture now, but if at the beginning those people were small groups, a kind of very light constellation of small initiatives, practically today, even though unfortunately it's not the mainstream, but in every area we can see some kind of trends that are becoming stronger. So nowadays it's clear that the food can also, is not only the industrial, highly energy and chemical intensive agriculture, but you can have also the local agriculture, etc., etc. It's clear also for the European community that when you talk about welfare, you can think to the traditional welfare in which there are the served and the serving, but you can use the term of community-based welfare in which the work of the community as is there can be part of. There is the idea of the possibility to rethink how we live in our houses, breaking the cages, the boxes in which each one is in its own box, and imagining that we can have some service that can be shared. And the co-housing, the collaborative housing. And you can ask, and whatever area or life is not anymore simply small groups, very alternative, but there is a kind of trend. And this has been the main discussion, how to make this possibility lasting in time, a possibility to spread. After a while, we started, especially in the design area, to say, well, but these are not only solving problems, they are also sense-making. You know, design, normally we say design is solving problem, but it's also sense-making. And we started to see that there was the beginning of a new culture, and therefore maybe of a new civilization, because there was a different idea of time, a different idea of work, a different idea of relationships, a different idea of places, and all those were in opposition to the main trend and started to create different perception of space, time, relationship, work. But now, and this has been, for what regards myself, they know, no, it's what I normally did. But now I will also to add that all those are also regenerating an idea of proximity. Why? Because we should look one by one and to recognize in which way they do it. But let me summarize only on this point. If the core of this 21st century social innovation is collaboration, by definition, collaboration means that we do something together that has also to be in a proximity system. So all of them have something to do with the interaction in between people that are in the same place. They interact with the place for the local production, for taking care of your neighborhoods, for doing something for the elderly to keep them inside the city. So I will read all the story of the wave of social innovation that characterized the 21st century until now, also as something that is regenerating the idea of proximity. And of course, this is my story, but it's not only my story, because the story became very spread, and at a certain moment, a kind of slogan that was around since a long time, but has been taken with a different strength. That is the one that in the journal call it the 15-minute city. It could be 10 minutes, it could be 20 minutes, but the important thing is that you reconsider the city as a place that should offer a system of proximity that are rich and diversified. And the beginning of the change has been when this lady, that is the mayor of Paris, used this slogan to support her campaign to be re-elected 2 years ago. And she has also been elected. But beyond what she said, afterwards, I am in Italy, and we have election of mayors, and all the progressive mayors have been elected in the last 6 months using this concept of a 15-minute city. I prefer to call it the city of proximity for the reason that I told you, but practically the meaning is the same. And so what is the city of proximity? The city of proximity, let's try to, it's the idea of proximity articulated for the city. So a city where everything you need in everyday life is just a few minutes walk from where you are, of course, and so less traffic, less CO2, less stress, more time opportunity, very important. Because that the city of zoning was optimizing each one of the functions. But if you consider the kind of mess that was generating, also in terms of waste of time in a more systemic way, it was not effective at all. It was effective one by one for the different zones, but not for the systems. And when you try to imagine something that is more based on proximity, you are giving back to people a lot of time that otherwise will be wasted. A city where it's possible, and probably people, as I said before, to meet, to start conversation, to decide to plan something together. And so the possibility to have more empathy, more sociability, more social integration, and more sense of closeness. That is the opposite of the city without care. At the same time, it's not a kind of a collection of villages of the past. This, if you want, we can discuss afterwards, but in many places when people start to discuss now about city of proximity, use also the term the city as a collection of villages. the city of villages. I'm very against this way of describing it. First of all, because the past will not come back. So the village of the past, if you like it or not, in any case, even if you like it a lot, it will not come back. But many people, including myself, I don't like so much the village of the past. So we have to propose this idea of the city of proximity as a kind of balance in between being capable to connect the long networks, the one that connect with whoever in the world, with the small networks. So this kind of balance in between having the capability to be local, but at the same time to be also connected and not too close in a kind of provincial situation. And somebody say, yes, but it's impossible. And somebody in Italy recalled that Florence, when was the capital of the Renaissance, had 17,000 people. So it was more than a 50-minute city, so less. The time to go everywhere and everybody know each other. And also I added that the place in New York where Andy Warhol and all the factories started was called the Village, because it was a place in which the normal daily life had still this kind of a character of proximity. So there is no antagonism. This is very important for us to understand that to talk about the city of the proximity is not against to be open and cosmopolitan. But if we have to talk a lot about the proximity, simply because it has been in danger. And so in some way we have to push a little bit in this direction, but without forgetting that we have also to cultivate the long-distance relationships. And finally, the city of proximity could be also the basis for an infrastructure that generates a city that is intrinsically sustainable and resilient. So to have a city that is intrinsically sustainable and resilient, the systems have to move toward, as I said before, the distributed system organization. And this could be the basis to create the city as a city of ecosystem that are at the same time sustainable and resilient. So this has been proximity. What could be some vision about the scenario of proximity? And now, being a scenario, I said I imagine to base it on what social innovation has generated in the past 20 years, but how to implement it. Being here, and I've been very happy to spend 3 years, but not all the time. I was here 1 week a month, because I was fascinated by what was happening here. And what was happening here, the super blocks, the superillas or super manzanas, and this story of giving back the streets to the citizens and to transform the streets as public space. They become platform for many different projects. But I will not talk about Barcelona. I leave you to go on with the discussion of Barcelona, because even though I like it a little bit, I know it. When I give my lecture, I try to use this example, but I think that this is not the moment here to tell you about Barcelona from me that come from Italy. So I will use mainly Milano, some Italian example, and the Milano ones in particular. I have to accelerate also, I think. So what is the case of Milano is a very good example. It's not so much well known because it's not so visible, much less visible than Barcelona, for instance. But as I will say later, there is some value in this not being so visible. And we can find an interesting interactions in between what I call the molecular activities and the governance of the city. I don't like to talk so much about, very frequently, me too, sometimes say the bottom up and the top down. The bottom up are the social innovation, the top down is what the city do. But I think that is a little bit misleading, because collaborative governance is not being on the top. collaborative governance, as we will see, is to create a better ground. So in some way, if we consider the granularity and the molecular activities, the institutions should not be over, should be under, should be capable to generate a more fertile ground in which things can happen. In any case, in Milano we have had a lot of molecular initiatives that are independent projects done by different people. And we can have citizens take care of the neighborhoods, bars that become concierge, co-working that become proximity social centers, makerspace become agent to bring back manufacturing in the city, farmer market as a connecting place for localized food networks, municipal market that become also cultural centers. This one I like a lot is that in the same market there is also an office of the Politecnico, that is my original university, that is done there exactly to have the possibility to be a research place for proximity. So I've been so quick because I imagine that you can at least have the flavor of what it is. So this molecular social initiative are a result of a diffuse design capability. So each one of them is a result of a design activity. Frankly speaking, very few, especially the origin, had some professional designer inside, even though now things are a little bit changing. But by every point of view, they have been designed. And what we designer, professional designer, expert designer can do is to help all these people to make what they do. So to help in triggering new ideas, to help in consolidating some idea, to help to make them lasting in time, to help them in spreading. And this is what until for many years has been under the umbrella of design for social innovation. So the design action of the expert designer for social innovation was not a specific discipline, but you can use communication, interaction, service design, design of environments, and also products in some cases. Okay, this is the most well-known part of the story. There is another, at a certain point we discovered that these molecular activities to last in time, they should, at a certain point, to find a good interaction with the institutions. And I would say also the institutions that want to do something lively in the society have to be capable to generate the conditions for these resources to emerge. And so in some way to be capable to recognize the energy that could be in the society, to give to this energy some possibility to develop, and not as often it happens, to be against very often. So these are what the public policies to trigger and support social resources and molecular initiatives. And I have to say that in Milano, in the past 20 years, they did it quite well. And if this is not so visible, it's because in Milano there has not been one main project. So this is not a critique. Every place has its own profile. But in Barcelona, you had this big idea of the superias, and the superia became a kind of flag. It was very visible. Everybody in the world knew that there was this big project, etc., etc. In Milano, there have not been any big project like this, but the project has been to be capable to create a fertile ground to make it happen. And this, in my view, it's in some way a limit, because at a certain point you need also to be recognized for what you do. Not only to write here, I'm good, but also because the same people in Milano sometimes do not recognize what the city has done until now. Because maybe everybody knows something that is happening nearby where they are, but there has not been the capability to give a strong image of what is happening. At the same time, this way is very inclusive, so has been capable to include a lot of energy that exists in Milano, probably more than in other places. And I will very shortly, because I really want to finish, three kind of actions that correspond to three kind of design interventions that we can do. The first one is what does it mean to design, to create proximity systems? And I use this example. This is a small example, but in my view, tell all the story that I want to say. This was a platform for welfare in Milano, WIMI, and it was a platform to tell to the people what are the services that are being proposed, could be accessible for the people in the city, both the public and the not public, but private, but in relation with the public. But the good idea is to imagine this platform and to imagine that this platform could be based on the distributed network of physical places. So the platform was digital one, but they decided to have physical places where to put this. And the physical places were in the different neighborhoods. But the physical places are not like this, but they are mostly like this. So the physical place has been capable not only to spread the formal professional service, welfare service in this case, but to use this action to have these services distributed in the city as a system, enabling system to generate new communities. So to make them not like this, but like this. And I think this is image tell very well the story. But the third step has been that where to put this place. And this is called not a bar, because they choose not to have a self-standing place, only the office, but these offices had to enter in something that already exists, that is already embedded in the society. There could be bars, social centers, schools, or whatever, in which people have a kind of a continuity of relationships. And so they create a hybrid multifunctional space in which there is the bar, but there is also cultural activities. Oops, what is happening? It's happening that I'm talking too much. So the system decided that it was the moment to finish. Thank you. This was very nice.
Looks like it was not really charging.
Okay, but I think that I can use this to finish, to summarize in 2 minutes. So this was one. I think that there is a strategy that could be seen with 4 different steps. The first one is you have a centralized service, you distribute the service. The second one is you socialize the service, so you transform the service in something that is capable to generate a community around it. The third one is the one that we were seeing here, that you try to integrate in the service some resources that are not obvious, because if you think who are the actors, the agents of a welfare system, you don't think to the bar. But if you find the right way, the bar could bring some resources, the place, the physical place, the fact that people are accustomed to go there. So this is a more strategic design. Capability to reframe the system, to imagine the system in a different way, that you can integrate in the system something that was not before so obvious. And the last one, is to integrate, because as you see, this is a system that is mainly on welfare, but afterward there are other subsystems and community that could be related to safety, that could be related to food, and you can try locally to create an integration in between the different ones. And so this is, for me, one possible strategy. The second one that I wanted to show you, but I can't tell you, so. Yeah, I already said these 4 different steps. The second one is to try to have in every place some hub, some place that is particularly attractive for people, And we have the Case di Quartiere. In this case, it's Torino because I had these images, but we have also in Milano, in which you have different places, as you probably have also here, that are for meeting people, to socializing, to empowering, so to give courses and to teach something, to cook in a different way, but also, in this case, also a kind of extension of the house, because they are also places where you can have a guest house, for instance. And also in some of them there is the showering, because we discovered that there are a lot of people that we imagine that in our city everybody has a good bathroom, but it's not like this. So you can offer the possibility of showering and having a good bath. And so mixing function and people, so this is very important, because if you do in this way, you have the poor one that goes maybe driven because there is a good shower, but they are not going to the place for the poor where you are to find your public bathroom, but in the same place where there are restaurant, public activity, and cultural activity, etc. And normally these hubs have different functions, and our expert design is to try to balance them in a way that they can live together, because when you try to, it's easy to say they have to be together, but it's not so easy to do it. So there is a lot to be designed. And the third example that I wanted to make is, I don't know if you have, probably you have also in Barcelona, but is that at the end, the people have to be helped to be more capable to design, the normal people. So we have a very interesting project in Milan, it's called the Neighborhood School, that is something between an incubator of ideas, but also a school. So you don't need to have the idea as the normal incubator in which you have to be more or less a professional to make everything. You can have simply a vague idea of what you would like to do in your neighborhoods, and there is a team that help you, and help you not because for sure that idea will be feasible, but as you do in the School of Design. So you do some exercises. Afterward, maybe some of these ideas could also become real, but in any case, you have learned something. And so there is a connecting good ideas, ideas exchanging, ideas discussion, and afterward, also in this case, we can see strategies that is what design can do to help in collecting these ideas, what we can do to help in developing, so our co-design methodology, and also our co-design presentation, the way in which we make some idea visible and comprehensible. And this is a successful story, because it's already some years that it works, and it works well. And finally, the conflict. Why I say the conflict? Because especially after the COVID, but it's not only after the COVID. In relation to the story that I'm told you until now, the COVID that could be seen as a huge social experiment in which hundreds of millions of people had to change something. So when I said before there had been a wave of social innovation that started with this century, now probably we are in the middle of a new way of social innovation that we are not yet totally capable to recognize, but something for sure will happen given the experiment that has been done at such a large scale. So considering what is interesting for us, people have rediscovered the importance of the micro-sociality. So it was something that was not considered anymore, and people discovered that care need to be near, to be in touch. If you need something, you cannot use your virtual community to have a bottle of milk from your friend in New Zealand. Therefore, people discover that with our neighbors, we share something that is extremely important, even though we don't have the same political ideas, if we don't have the same, we don't like the same games or the same music, but we share a space. And sharing the space is very important when you need care. And for the same reason, it's very important to have some activities that happen nearby, so to rediscover the importance of the neighborhoods. And afterward, as everybody knows, all this has been done using in a different way. So we are talking about a proximity that is by all means a hybrid proximity that is based on the possibility to use some technology instead of melting the communities as it has been until now, the mainstream, but helping to people to reconnect. A kind of a huge meetup, let's say, huge and articulated meetup. But this scenario are competing because what I'm proposing to you now, in my view, is strong. So it's not only a dream, it's something that has the possibility to be developed, but we have to be aware, and this is a conclusion, that the city of distance is still there. And is still there also redefining a little bit themselves with all these smart city ideas that say, do not worry, we with our technology, do as you have ever done, with our technology we will solve everything. So on one side we have the old idea of city of distance, but integrated some technology that should help. But we have also, but this is the first one, smart distance I call it, is more a remaining of the past. But we have a new one that is very strong and emerging, that is, oh, don't worry, you can do everything at home. You are not 50-minute city, you are a 0-minute city, because everything you need can come to your home, in your computer, if it is information, or your front door, if it is something that will be delivered by the new platforms. And this is clearly, is very strong, and it's socially, and by my point of view, it's a nightmare, because it's the end of the city, is the end of the society. It's the maximum of individualization. Each one is its own box, and afterward everything arrives. And finally, now we have this story about the metaverso, how you say in Spanish? The metaverso, that is even worse for me, because it's a way to escape from where you are. They say, okay, yes, this world is really awful, but we can move somewhere else. So somebody say we can move to Mars in the future, but we can move, right now we put our mask and we can have another world. And all this, of course, is totally diverse and in opposition with the idea of proximity that I tried to present you today. So our role as a designer is not only to make things happen, but also to be capable in some way to deconstruct the proposals and to see the different ideas that are frequently very mixed. So for instance, if you read some European proposal on the Green Deal, it's a mix. There is no only one idea, but we should be capable to recognize. So you have to make your choice. Maybe your choice will not be the same as mine. But at least for me, it's to recognize the different ideas and to be capable to be partisan, to take position, to say, I totally disagree with something. And I think that in this moment it's very important to stand up and to have a very strong position, because the situation is really very grave. And the last one, have such a power beyond. And the power are pushing towards something that, in my view, is awful and is for sure totally opposite to everything that we said before. And it's a political issue, it's an economical issue, but of course, it's at the base, at the end, it's a design choice. So you can choose. There is the possibility to choose in one direction to the other one. The problem is to have a sufficiently clear idea. And of course, I hope that this idea of proximity could help. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for such an exciting talk. Is there any question in the audience? Any suggestion? Any complaint?
Can you talk without that? Otherwise, I do not understand anything.
Yeah. Is this on? Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much. I enjoyed very much your talk. While you were going on, there was this concept that came to my mind that I think somehow was embedded in some of your ideas, but it was not explicitly mentioned, which is this idea of co-responsibility between these actors, the social innovators, and the public administrations. And I think, in my opinion, this is crucial to propose a new way of dealing proximity policies, which is not new, but it has to be refounded somehow, I think. This idea that is not just that public administrations can support, good social innovation ideas, but that we as a society must be involved in this idea of being co-responsible of our destinies. So we cannot just complain that politicians don't do well their jobs, or we cannot expect them to solve our problems, or we cannot just assume that there's nothing we can do to change things, but we have to be co-responsible. And I think this is not a big project, like in the case of Superblocks. Superblocks, from a political perspective, in my opinion, has a connection with the big projects of the old times, the Olympic Games in Barcelona or others. Like, we have this big project that is able to mobilize a transformation of a city. I don't think this is necessary, but some very strong ideas help very much to prompt this energy and put it together in a kind of consensus, although a consensus is not possible anymore. But, and I was also thinking about this idea of already quite old now by Fajardo in Medellin, the idea of social urbanism, not as a project, but as an idea that has implicit, getting people on board for a transformation. So I think, in my opinion, all these cities, mostly in Europe, the ones I know that are moving on through these transformations, they must send this message that we have to be co-responsible of our destinies and we have to collaborate.
I agree. I don't add anything. I could add, but I don't add, because let's see if there is somebody else. But because I agree. So what I could add is only make it a little bit longer.
Any question?
See? No? Okay. My name's Holly. It's wonderful to meet you. I'm a professor for design students, and I use your book, which I adore, Design When Everybody Designs. I have a question for my students, I guess, because you said our role as designers is to make things happen. And my students want to make things happen. But in design education, or I guess this is a question actually for asking your advice for design educators. How do we help our students pull away from the ego of design and look outside of just strategy and when we're implementing these strategies, what is some advice you might have for either a professor or a student to help them make things happen?
But I will try to answer, even though this is another lecture, that is what does it mean to design in complexity. But it's a very important issue, especially here. Let me try to make it the most short that is possible. I think that all the discussion about the city in this way, when we discuss about more than human design, or when we discuss about the necessity to decolonize our Western-based design, all this can be brought to one issue. We discover complexity. So we discover complexity, the people of my age, we discovered, because before I was not, I have not clear the idea what is complexity. I discovered the complexity theoretically 35 years ago. But that was more a kind of a scientific change in the paradigm. Now it's as this idea of complexity is spread and passed through every single element of our system. So there is nothing that we can do without recognizing conditions in which we cannot simplify. Or some people simplify, but simplifying, they create a mess. And there are, unfortunately, people that recognize complexity and try to reduce the complexity with populism, with many complotism, so these kind of ideas. If we want to recognize the reality in its own complexity, what we do and how. So one thing that happened in the past is when you say complexity, so it means that you have to think in a very systemic way, considering all the elements, and this both to overwhelm ourselves and the students of informations. And so if you design a chair, you have to do the life cycle analysis, and afterwards the social analysis, and afterwards the social economic analysis, and so on and so on and so on. And at the end, it's terribly boring, and you don't do anything. So for me, to design in complexity is not to complicate. It's first of all to say whatever we do, no one has a total control of what we do. So we can collect information for 3 years, but it will never be enough. So at a certain point, you have to reduce, not in the term of the reductivism, but you have to choose a subsystem on which you can operate. And the subsystem in which you can operate, we together are presenting a book they called plugins. So this is the idea of accepting the complexity, accepting the fact that you cannot totally control what will happen. What you can do is to choose a subsystem that is such that you can in some way control what you are doing, and afterward you introduce this system in the larger system and you see what happens. And you have to be sensitive enough to change your idea, to recognize what is happening. So the story is, if you are overwhelmed by information, you don't do, or you do something that looks to be very boring, and the creative people do not want to do it. So I think that we have to find a way to say we have to be capable to present and to make something in a modest way. So I use my creativity. My contribution to the system is to be creative. And of course, I try to make my best to understand what is the situation, and afterward to see what happened after that I make my action. But to make an action is fundamental, because the only way to navigate the complex system is a process of learning, and you cannot learn if you don't do anything. There is nothing on which you can learn. So you have to dare. Of course, we have to know a little bit of experience. In my language, it's not only mine, but the people that make the same background, you have to choose, or try to choose, error-friendly solution. So you should not do something that is so daring that if you do something, it will create a catastrophe. So you should try to avoid some move that could be so dangerous. But you have to dare to do something. So what we should say to the student is, we have to make our best. We have a position in the space and time. From our position, we can look around. We have the obligation to collect what we can collect. And afterward, we have to do. And afterward, we have to be very attentive to see what happens, and maybe to change, or maybe to learn something to make it well. So this, for me, is the way to put together the idea that we are interconnected, the idea that everything we do is a co-design, but without losing the possibility for each one to make its own choice and to make something happen. Regarding the ego, I would like only to say, but this is another long story, that before the architects, we had the craftsmen that built the cathedrals. And the craftsmen made cathedrals without signing anything. So there is a possibility to be part of very beautiful actions, and so to bring your contribution as to build a cathedral in the mid-age without signing it, or without having the need to sign in that way. So this is, in my view, the way to try to move from the egocentric to somebody called the ecocentric, the ecological way of considering what we are doing.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I have only one reflection, which is not a question, because I don't know if there's any question there. Yeah? No, mine is almost a joke. So.
Thank you. Hi, good night. I'm Emilio from Mexico, a student from the Design for Emerging Futures. I have a couple of questions. One is kind of a rhetoric, because maybe it's kind of out of topics about hybrid proximity. It's more about design politics. And it's a topic that some of the times, from the point of view of design, is kind of scary. And the rhetoric part is sometimes the design interventions are actually very politic, but for design, for the designer or architect or design in general, it's kind of hard to talk about that. It's kind of a taboo. So with that in mind, how can a designer talk about politics with his peers in order to not be afraid of being political, or to design political interventions? I don't know if that makes sense.
I'm not sure 100% that I've understood, but I think very simply that all the design choice are political choice. Because in the moment in which you choose to do something or not to do something, you create an intervention in the system. And the politics, I wrote a book that is called The Politics of the Everyday. It's not the one that was mentioned before. And I tried to explain, but I think that I thought that was sufficiently clear, that there is the politics of everyday means the choice that we do that can reorient the system in a certain directions. So in the moment in which you don't do things as they have always been done, you make a choice, and this creates some change. So you can declare or not that you be aware or not that you are making some politics by that point of view. That is not the politics that is very important for me of the parties, the politics of the organization. And in that book I was trying to explain, and this has a lot to do with the relationship in between these molecular activities and the institutions. What is the relationship between the politics of the everyday, that means the choice that you do in your life that could reorient the system in one direction or the other, and what are the politics of the policymakers and the politics of the politicians that have a level in which you and we or group can make some choice, but afterwards the society is much more complex. So a level of politics in the most traditional sense, in my view, exists, and the fact that now it's in crisis is a problem, because it's very important that exists, because it's the level in which you have to make the mediation to represent the most of the society. But each one of us, if we want or not, if you decide to become vegetarian, this is a political choice on the everyday. If you decide to leave the car and go by bike, it's a political choice. If you decide to organize, to be active with others that have kids and organize something around the school that works, it's a political choice. So you can tell it or not. In my view, it's better to say that it's a political choice to understand in which way they are political, because otherwise, especially for us, not for you, not maybe for the people here, but it's so easy to be taken by the new technologies and what happens, and to think that we have to be for innovation stop. No, innovation can go in many different directions. So today, the fact that somebody is putting so much money on the metaverso do not mean that it's a destiny. Everybody, many people, journalists and others, and also some designers says, of course it will be like this. This is the internet of the future. We have to accept it and to enter in it. In my view, not. Maybe I cannot discuss about this, so you can have different opinion. But what we said in relationship, for instance, to the opening of these parallel worlds is a political issue before becoming political, because there are some politicians that in case they take a position. I don't know if I answer, because by in any case. But
one more question, maybe the last one.
My question is that it's possible that this digital space and proximity system can meet, or how can digital tools can help for this proximity system?
I'm not understood. Maybe if you say in Spanish, you understood?
That it is possible that this digital space can meet with this system, proximity system, or can digital tools can help for this proximity system?
The meta?
No, digital spaces.
No, yes. No, for me, as I said, for me, today, the proximity is a hybrid proximity, because all of us already live in the physical world and also in the digital one. The problem is, as I was very shortly said before, the main impact of the digitalization of part of our life has been to complete the process of melting of all the traditional forms of organization, moving toward a society of individuals spread on the territory. But it's proved that some technologies can also help to reconnect the people. I use an example as a meetup, but meetup is very simple, but you have people that are spread, that do not know each other, and the platform can help in creating a common language, focalizing a common interest, and coordinating the possibility to meet and to do something together. So the choice in that case is to use the technology to reaggregate instead of using the technology to increase the spread and the distancing in between people. And this is a choice, because in the way in which you design, you can help one or the other direction. So if you say, you do a project, you say, but this project at the end generate some rich and diversified system of proximity or not. And this could be, now this is my position, it's not necessarily your position, but it's my proposal. If I am so much against the metaverso, it's because it's in my view, it's a totally different generative metaphor. So we have had, and in my view, we still have two generative metaphors when we talk about digital technology. The one of the augmented reality and the one of the virtual reality. And the virtual reality is the one in which you have to put the glasses or to enter in a space. So in some way, you separate yourself from the physicality of your body, the physicality of the space in which your physical body lives, and you enter in another dimension, where the augmented reality is you with your body in a space that is hybrid. And this hybrid condition can help also in reorganize your physical life. So it's not easy, because you could also live in the hybrid and progressively move towards a scenario to everything at home and everything from home. But in any case, at that point, still you are you in your box, and you wait for things that happens and arrives. So in some way, you are still in that world. With the digital, with the metaverso, in my view, it's only a new way to talk about the virtual reality with new media, with new possibility, and with an incredible money that has made that Zuckerberg said this, and now every journal is talking every day 3 articles on the metaverse. So that is awful, in my view. Awful also considering the journal and the journalists that accept this story. It's a kind of drug, a kind of, so you say the world is so nasty that I'm not interested anymore, and I move in another space. Until it was a game, it could be because they come largely from the game. They are creating a kind of big game in which you can have also economical exchange and everything. But in my view, if that one goes with the energy that they are putting inside, is creating, not to talk about the environmental issue, because all those, you know, the digital things and the artificial intelligence is consuming a lot of energy and water and whatever. So it's the fact that we do not touch them do not mean that they are not consuming. So it's forgetting everything that is related to your physical reality, forgetting that you are entering in the world to be sustained, ask for a quantity of energy and water for cooling, etc., where there are the big centers, and to have a kind of huge entertainment at the end of the day.
Thank you. So once again, thank you very much, Ezio. Thank you very much, everybody, and hope to meet you soon. Thanks.
Good.
I'm going upstairs to take my coat, and then we wait here or downstairs, as you prefer.